Hajime, welcome back to Comic-Jutsu. JT McRoberts here. Today we're going to bring you another edition of Superhero Spotlight featuring Prince Namor of Atlantis in honor of his recent debut and assimilation into the MCU. I thought we'd take a look at some of his earliest appearances in the Marvel Universe, including his first appearance in Fantastic Four, issue 4, where he makes his triumphant return to what is at the time the modern Marvel Universe as a guest star in the Fantastic Four. I do have that presented here in the Essential Fantastic Four collection, but we are going to look at it in this rather lovely Treasury edition, as it is included in part of the Marvel Treasury Edition series, as were a few other Namor appearances, such as this one where he teams up with Doctor Doom, and of course that time he was a Defender for about a year, or I guess a couple years. There was that kind of weird time jump between issues as the Defenders formed, but that is another story altogether. So we are going to start with his first appearance. Now this story, even though they, pretty much ignored it in order to bring him into the MCU, it has been retold in several different ways, including the Marvel's Heroes Reborn initiative, where they brought the Image guys back and gave them a crack at retelling some classic Marvel superhero stories. And here you can see issue 2 and 3 feature Prince Namor, drawn by the great Jim Lee. But what took those guys 2 issues to tell, Jack Kirby and the great loquacious Stan Lee did it in 1 issue. So here we have The Coming of the Submariner. This is a big book here. I had to adjust my camera up just a bit in order to bring you this. I do prefer to look through the facsimile editions, or the original printings if possible. But these are fun. These old Treasury editions have a nice warm spot in my heart. When I first started reading comic books, as most people do, it's because you had a friend that had a big collection of comic books, and I think at one point he just wanted to get rid of some of them, and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll take them. But anyway, when I would visit and check out his books, he had several of these Treasury editions, and I just love them. When you're a kid, these giant oversized versions of the stories are they're so immersive, and the art, especially with Marvel, is just, it really shines in this format, this oversized format, especially with the great Jack Kirby at the helm. But believe it or not, that was not the first place I actually read this story. I don't know if you remember, but there were a series of digest size collections that were released, I guess in the late 70s, maybe early 80s, possibly 1980 or 81. I have to look at the dates for those. I don't actually have the Fantastic Four ones here, but at my school, believe it or not, and at the local library, they had a ton of these. So I read probably the first 12 issues of the Fantastic Four, reprinted in full color. They're not those facsimile types that have all the ads and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, that was where I was first exposed to it, and believe it or not, those were also my first real Marvel comics that I just sat and read and enjoyed the story, and I was totally pulled into it by the greatness of what Jack Kirby and Stan Lee were presenting to us. Without further ado, We don't want to fall too far down memory lane. Let's flip over here to where they reprint issue 4 in this specific Marvel Treasury edition. The Coming of the Submariner. And you just see the great Jack Kirby at play here. You got a half splash page to open. And he dives right into the narrative. Reed explains everything to you right off the bat. He ran away and it's all your fault, thing. The storytelling here is great. I mean, Kirby always tried to convey what was actually happening in the scene visually, even if they were just talking about it. He never wanted to have just talking heads. And also emotionally. So you have Reed pointing out to the city, so obviously they're looking for something. Sue over here looks distraught. Thing looks a bit disgruntled. Maybe even nonplussed. Here you have Sue reasoning with him. It's all your fault he ran away. Just great recapping here. I mean, this is I mean, Kirby laid the template for the Marvel method and the Marvel house style. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about these books, is just to make sure that modern fans are aware of the innumerable contributions that Jack Kirby made to storytelling and comics and Marvel Comics, and in its own, and of course all of that laid the foundation for the MCU, which is why these bits of history need to be archived and appreciated and preserved, whether or not they see their own translation to the MCU. And I don't want to talk about that too much, but what happens in the MCU actually reflects back into the comics. So some of these are just going to get kind of retconned and wiped out of existence. And that's why we want to talk about them. Here you see Kirby doing the classic. Every comic is somebody's first comic, so they're showing off the powers. Here we see Sue showing off as she invisibly drinks this soda. There you see Reed exercising his elasticity, his elastic ability. Then we catch up with Johnny Storm. What's he doing? He's welding with his finger. Why not? He's the Human Torch. Of course, the Thing catches up to him. Rather than knock on the door, he just smashes through the wall. Hey, I can feel the heat. He's inside. The Thing. The Thing has him cornered. And he's like, you're gonna stick around and talk to us. But then he has one of those ill-timed transformations back into his human self. This used to happen every now and then, but just very briefly. It was always tied into his emotions, much like the Incredible Hulk. And Ben is so elated at being normal again that Johnny can just run outside and fly away, and then Ben gets mad and boom, he turns back into a thing. Just great emotive body posturing here. You see just the weight of the world on the Thing. And this stuff really translates. I mean, I think it's best featured in these oversized editions, right? But you could still feel the emotion and the gravitas of it all in those little digest editions that I read. Kirby was just a master storyteller here. Not that I'm telling you anything you don't know if you came to this video. Here, showed the Thing in the streets of New York, and I mean, nobody knew this milieu better than Kirby did. And this is funny. I love how he would do this in the same page. I actually noticed this a couple times, where they're going to introduce the Submariner. So before they introduce the Submariner, they're going to pre-introduce him, and he does it visually again. And how does he do it? He's reading a comic book. And it's funny that it's just one called Submariner, because I don't know that he ever actually had just a Submariner comic. He was part of, you know, the Marvel Collective back in the day, and he was always either in he was just in one of those books that were anthologies, or he would show up, as what would become the Invaders. What were they originally called? Not the All Star Squadron, but something else. That's DC anyway. But I love this because it goes from, hey, let's introduce the Submariner here, to boom, there he is in the modern day. It's funny because this guy sees Torch reading this comic book and he's like, hey, we got a guy that looks just like that right over here. There he is. Except, of course, this is the amnesiac and despondent Submariner. They're like, show him how strong you are. Rip this phone book in half. And here you see Submariner just bats him away with a swing of his arm. That's one thing we always talk about with these superpowered beings, and how they just use arm punches and basic arm motion, like there are no body mechanics behind anything. And it works because you can see the effect. You can imagine how powerful this guy is. I mean, he can lift 75 tons, 50 tons out of water. Up to much, much more than that when he's in water, obviously. But you can see the reaction. He just kind of flicks his arm back. Go away, you puny flea. This guy is just almost thrown across the room, like Incredible Hulk TV show style, where he always threw people. He just never grabbed anybody and like crushed their head or just smashed their face in. So that's funny. I love how brawls would just easily break out in Kirby's New York. They're like, hey, let's teach him a lesson. How dare he push our buddy back? And they decide to jump on him. Get him! And there you see Namor just immediately gorilla presses this guy. And you see bodies just flying. And this is just great storytelling, just to get across the idea of how much power and strength that the Submariner has by showing you all these constant effects. Though it's interesting that Kirby doesn't do his usual commanding of the psychic space. Like normally when somebody would take over a combat, he would have that figure gradually become larger and larger and dominate more and more of the compositions and the page space. So Torch says, hold on, leave him alone. Let's take a look at this guy. Maybe he does look like the Submariner. We'll just give him a little shave. And again, I don't know if this is borderline like hate activity. They're going to grab a homeless guy and just force him to shave. But I guess Torch is doing it relatively painlessly, though Submariner should probably be somewhat affected by that. I'm sure that's drying him out some more. But Torch uses his little burning finger to just burn his beard right off. And wow, it is him. Once his hair is back, you can see the Vulcan-like ears and eyebrows, even though this predates Star Trek and the look of Mr. Spock and the Vulcans. Let the world beware. Here you've got people reacting to Mr. Fantastic again. They're looking everywhere for Johnny. There's Sue invisibly looking around. And Johnny says, okay, I'm going to fly you to the water. And if you're the Submariner, I'm just going to dump you in the water. That should take care of the rest. So that's what he does. I always thought this was curious. The idea was that Human Torch could fly because he would turn into fire and become lighter than air. But here he's partially fire, but his hands are not burning. So he can carry the Submariner without hurting him, I suppose. Takes him, dumps him into the bay. Once he gets down there, you see Submariner throw off all of his hobo attire. And he's got his little Namor briefs on underneath, which I find so funny. Like, he never looked at those and thought, like, man, why am I wearing this weird underwear? Especially in 1962 when this appeared, you know. But here you have it, just in 4 panels. Boom, 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 boom. From drowning man to reacting with power, you know, claiming that power, and then whoosh, Kirby shows him just whipping through the water in a way that no human could possibly do. I mean, this is, you know, this is like stuff you would have seen the creature from the Black Lagoon do, that type of swimming. As we discussed in the other superhero spotlight, in Namor's first appearance in Motion Picture Funnies, you get that entire origin and storyline, and you see the motivation where he's mad about the human experiments and intruding upon the Atlantean land and threatening their sovereignty. So they tie it right into that, well, not only by having the Human Torch be the one that recovers him, with the Torch being the other Golden Age character that appears not remade, but I suppose it's a bit of a retcon, but it's just a completely different Human Torch, so that doesn't qualify as a retcon. But the modern Marvel version of the Human Torch here is the one who recovers Submariner, which is fitting in that way. And they stay true to that origin by having him return to a now destroyed Atlantis, which he believes has been destroyed by bombs. Here he talks about the water and how it's radioactive. And when he comes back, he's mad. And he's mad at Johnny right away. "You young fool, do not feel proud of what you have done. For returning my memory, you have signed the death warrant of the human race." Boy, Stan really let himself go with this. I mean, all this Imperious Rex and all the funny put downs that Namor had for people he thought were beneath him, they're just hilarious. "Submariner's revenge. Look, a flare. It must be the torch. Let's go." Again, this is kind of a cinematic technique, a look-see, where you see the people looking, and then in the next frame you see what they were looking at. So that's a look-see. They take off in their fantastic car. This stuff is just so brilliant because it's an imaginative feast. I mean, Kirby was unleashed here and coming up with these things, and he wasn't bogged down by real-world science. I mean, they added this pseudoscience spin to everything, and some things had maybe just the slimmest basis in real physics, but for the most part it was just, how do we make this page entertaining and use this medium of both comic books and the superhero lens, even though it's not a medium of its own, but it's this stimone, this method, this way of storytelling, this way of modern myth and presenting stories to the world. If any of that makes any sense, that is. But this is great. So here we have Namor picking up the threat. "I'll unleash a monster such as mankind has never dreamed of." And this is why I used the John Byrne Namor blowing the horn, because he does that in this particular issue. So that's why the John Byrne Namor is featured on the YouTube thumbnail preview instead of the Kirby Prince Namor. So hopefully you're okay with that. Giganto. Now, Giganto, I do believe, isn't that the name of the whale that swallows Pinocchio in Pinocchio? So that's funny. I love how they just, Kirby drew this thing in there, but then Stan's like, "We'll make it Giganto from Pinocchio," because I guess they could get away with that. And here Namor has what is effectively a magic horn, because he says several times over that it controls Giganto. Though I would like to think that instead of it just being magic, like that anybody could get a hold of it, that maybe Namor just knows that this type of horn and this blowing underwater and the sounds that it makes or whatever is known to attract Giganto, and he just blows it and moves around. But then also, with it being magic, I mean, nothing wrong with that. And here you go, just great storytelling. And look at the use in size and scale here. Giganto explodes out of the water, and you see it dwarfing this ship here. Look at this. I mean, that is unbelievable. Could you imagine how frightening that would be if you were on that ship and something like that came out of the water? That's why I don't like to take deep sea trips, just FYI, because one of these might actually be out there. We never know. We're too small for him to notice. Thank goodness. And of course, the city is going crazy. I love, he does all this in one page. Going from Namor summoning him, showing the effect of Giganto's arrival, and then the panic in the city. Already, they have the military mobilized here by the bottom of the page. You know, that's in what, 8 panels? You see the effects that the artillery is, he's completely unaffected by the barrage from the military. Fantastic Four is looking on again. There's a C look reverse. Reed pulls out some tricks. You guys try a few things. Namor blows his horn. He'll follow this anywhere. And ultimately they figure out, got to put a bomb inside of him, and only the thing can do it. Only he's strong enough to carry it. Literally strap it on his back. Here you have Jack Kirby calling back to his service in the war, and you know, the use of bombs during that. And here you go. It's the only way to get rid of this thing, this unstoppable force, this or rather immovable object. Perhaps is what Giganto is in this scenario, with the bomb being the unstoppable force going inside of him. So the thing carries it in his mouth, and of course he gets inside. There's little monsters everywhere. That's why I say this is just Jack Kirby at his best. You know, you see that time drawing Challengers of the Unknown. You see that time drawing all the monster Marvel books. Paying off here is he just uses tropes and imagery and just random designs from those things everywhere. Thing runs out. Very minimalist use of panels, but that's great. I mean, you have the tick, 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 tick all around him, and you get the notion. I mean, he could have drawn an entire background in there, but by taking the background out and just using the lettering to be a part of the visual design, it gives this more presence, more command of the page. And you really get into the thing's head and that feeling of suspense and the rising tension that this thing is about to go off. And boom, there it goes. You know, nowadays that would be like a whole splash page or whatever, but Kirby is trying to get through here telling a story. So he'll do big moments, small like that, but he still manages to convey the power of that explosion there. And of course, here you have the use of psychic space again, where Namor kind of takes over the bottom of the page after all of that. He's like, you haven't beaten me. I still have my horn. I can call more of these monsters. Sue snatches it from him. He grabs Sue, and here you go. Here's the storyline. It would have been interesting. Could you imagine a Fantastic Four film, okay, that handled the origin of the Fantastic Four, and then maybe introduction of the Mole Man in the middle, and then closed out with the return of the Submariner, all in one movie? I mean, that could have been phenomenal. And then in the sequels, you introduce Doctor Doom. In the third one, you feature their team up. The team up of Doctor Doom and the Submariner, that is. So anyway, so immediately Namor just falls right in love with Sue. And this is great because it just adds another level of conflict here. And Sue, it's a page later, and she says, okay, I'll do it. I'll become your bride as long as you don't destroy all of humanity. And this is great stuff. And then the Fantastic Four jumps on him. I love this, just the dialogue here, and Stan's use of verbiage. Back, you clods! None may strike the imperial person of Namor, the Submariner. I mean, it's crazy, it's cheesy, it's over the top, but it was Namor, and it worked. So here we have the Human Torch's chance to redeem himself, and he takes on his fire form again. He's the one that brought Namor into this. Of course, this is the storyline arc for this particular issue, and Kirby was a master at just wrapping these things up on the last page. He uses his power. This is a power stunt here. If you're familiar with that term from the role-playing games, either Marvel Superheroes or the DC Heroes game. Power stunt to create a water vortex. That's using your power outside of its normal usage. Like, I mean, normally he would just be able to fly and be made of fire from it. But because of this, he's sucking Namor into the air. The pressure is unbearable. And it also sucks Giganto up into it, the remains of Giganto, and he just deposits the whole thing back into the ocean, leaving Namor back where he belonged. And they say, what if he comes back? We'll be ready. I swear it. So there you go. Classic stuff. Here's a little look at the cover here on the back. Namor carrying away Sue, which doesn't really happen like that, but that is a good narrative beat to feature on the cover. You know, it gives it a bit more urgency than if it had just been Namor facing off or squaring off with the Fantastic Four. So again, you just see that fantastic, amazing storytelling of the one and only Jack Kirby at play. There you have it. That's our spotlight for today on Prince Namor of Atlantis. Thanks for watching again. Like, comment, subscribe, tell your friends about the channel. Buy my graphic novel when it's available. I'm still working on it right now, so it'll be a while. But in the meantime, keep watching these videos. Spread the word. I'll see you in 2 and 2. Mate!